Museum of Graffiti Artist Talk program. And, you know, we have a history of chatting up a lot, so I think this will be a lot of fun and really interesting, and I think insightful for even myself. So welcome.
Cool. I'm happy to do this. This is fun. You know,
Yeah.
we got a lot to talk about.
Yes, yes, we do. Yes, we do. So let's jump right in. I usually you know, I read somebody's bio, but as I start, but I think your bio will be laid out as we speak. Of course, we know that you were the creator and director of Wild Style, the movie, which was a landmark movie for the hip hop culture. But
Yeah.
before we get into that, let's start early on, because you were an aspiring filmmaker before Wild Style, and one of your films, your early films, was The Deadly Art of Survival. And what I dig about this, and the backstory on this, of course, is the martial arts, and that period, that time period.
Yes.
So what year was this? Well, there it says 1978. That was. There's some
decline. Trying to call me. I just got rid of it. Okay. Thank you.
No.
Are you still here?
So the film, you know, you create this film in 1978, and yeah, you were into. Did I lose you? Are you around? What's going on? Are you with me still?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I can't hear you very well.
You can't? I'll speak louder. So one of your first films, right? The Deadly Art of Survival, 1978. And you take on martial arts.
I see you, but I don't hear you.
You don't? Okay.
Mayor, can you hear me?
Yes.
I can't hear you. I'm sorry.
One second.
How about...
No, don't worry about it.
Okay.
It's 1 second.
I'm not... Before you...
Can you hear me now?
No, not really. I mean, you're very faint.
I'm very faint. How about now?
Yes. And I'm trying to I have the call-in volume up. And
Okay.
I don't know, I can't, the volume is set all the way up. It may not be the right place to set the volume.
Can you hear me now?
No. I can hear you, but it sounds like you're very far away.
My volume's all the way up. 1 second. I'm sorry, guys.
I'm sorry too. I don't know why, but we're having a problem with the sound.
Can you I'm gonna
it's
hang
really
up. We'll restart. I'm gonna
what?
hang up. I'm gonna hang up and restart.
Okay, go ahead.
So I'm gonna flip this over and we're gonna start the conversation with you. Let me turn this light off. and of course, we all know and love Wild Style. But we're not going to start there. We're going to start with your first film,
Okay.
Deadly Art of Survival, which was premiered Friday, March 24th, 1978 at 8 p.m. At the Al Smith Center.
Yes.
So, you know, I'll just say this: that year, and of course, martial arts films make so much sense. Why don't you tell me a bit about this first feature film you did?
Well, it was shot in Super 8, as you can see here, but it was done with the most amazing talent. And people had like a kind of religious obsession with martial arts as a spiritual and physical discipline. And this man, Nathan Ingram, was organizing the community, and kids, girls and boys were organized into a crew that he had to a martial arts school to teach them the katas and different kinds of discipline. But he wanted to make a film, and I thought that this was a great, wonderful adventure. And we spent a whole year down by the Smith Projects, which happens to be where Lee Quinones is from. And
Yeah.
Lee was actually a student of his at one point. And here what you're looking at is a map painting that I did. Oh wow, you can zoom in. If you go down a little bit on the map, you'll see if you lower your vision, yeah, there you can see Lee, no, the other way back where you were, you can see Lee and Nathan Ingram in that image of, and Lee is surrounded by his wall murals, which he started in 1978, was the first one that he did, which was the Howard the Duck, which really
Right. That was
wowed people, and really was something so different, because here the artwork was not on a moving train, but it was something that people could come from all over the city to look at and talk about. And the principal of his office, the day that this was done at night, and the principal invited Lee Quinones into the principal's office, and Lee thought he was going to get kicked out of the school. And the principal said, "We really like the excitement that you're bringing to this school here, and we would like you to paint the other side of the mural with whatever you want." And of course, he painted this mural, which was Leo the lion in a dungeon. Yep. With skeletons. And so Lee began a kind of second career from painting trains to now doing handball courts all over the neighborhood. And of course, this is like a 1976, Lee train, which I didn't actually see this train when it was running, but I've seen these pictures, which give some of the energy of it.
I'll share with you that I've seen this train, these whole cars run. They ran for several years, and they were phenomenal. And just to kind of piggyback on what you said about his murals down there, even myself and Kel and writers from the Bronx and Queens would venture. We've heard about these murals in Writers' Corner, and we would venture down to seek them out. It was a little, it was kind of really cool.
It was like a pilgrimage, right?
Yeah, completely.
And that's how I felt, when I was making the Deadly Art of Survival movie. I was approached by Lee, who was driving like this little motorbike that he had souped up himself. Now you understand that he was a teenager with a big afro, a skinny kid. And I told him I would like to work with him on a film. And he said, bet. And I said, how am I going to find you? He said, I'm going to be around. And then he just disappeared in a cloud of motorbike smoke. and disappeared into where he lived. And I didn't see him again for 2 years. And that brings us to the next chapter of the story, which is
Well,
how this was how I was going to Times Square to look at kung fu movies because of this obsession with the movie and everything, the Super 8 movie. And during that time, the artist group that I hung out with organized a thing called the Times Square Show. And this is a poster that Jane Dixon designed and I silk screened in the Times Square show upstairs on the 3rd floor. And it's like a photo silk screen with painting on each sheet would be hand painted. And I plastered this all over the Lower East Side and other places to get people excited about the Times Square show.
And if I can interject, because what I love about this is it's so Times Square in that you're illustrating. It's really focused on, you know, 2 hands and 3 cards. Of course, this is a 3-card Monty Hustle, which was so prevalent, man, on every other corner back in them days.
Yes. And of course, Jane was working at the Spectacolor sign in Times Square from 1978. And so we sort of, in a sense, had this deep well of common obsession with Times Square. And we got together and we ended up living in Times Square for 12 years. And here's an image from the exterior of the Times Square show where Jean-Michel Basquiat had one of his first paintings shown, and Keith Haring, and people like Kiki Smith and Tom Otterness, and my brother John AHEARN.
A lot of great names came out of
yes,
this.
It was really a watershed time.
Yeah.
And there's Jane, and so
I want to talk. Let me just interject for a second because I want to talk about Times Square, right? Because you and her lived there, and she's again a painter artist who was also responding to this crazy environment, and all the energy of everyone just around her. And of course the Times Square show, we could see here how seminal it was.
That's on the Spectacolor board.
Yeah, and she had tell us a bit about that.
Well, the Spectacolor sign was where she was being, if you can go back a second, the Spectacolor sign was where she worked when I first met her in 1978. And yeah, that's okay. That's good. So, and she designed this animation on the Spectacolor board. And later on, she organized a group of artists that include Keith Haring and Crash and David Hammonds and many other artists.
Tank and Jenny Holzer. Right?
Jenny Holzer designed things. And of course, Jenny Holzer made a whole career later out of working with this kind of animated light board. And so this was kind of a large explosive force, but at that same time, we had places like Fashion Moda in the Bronx.
Right.
And we had
that
artists.
Was, Stefan Eins who launched it.
And yes, and there was an art show, which we will get into. I just wanted to move to
Yeah, so here I just want to cover a little bit about this show because it was so important, right? And
sure.
And I recall visiting your brother on Times Square when he was casting people.
Sure.
And of course we would see, like you said, you know, you guys would also venture up north and do these installations in the community. And so there was this really interesting bridge between uptown and downtown that I noticed really early on, and we gravitated equally to that energy.
Yes, and this is a mural that John did in 1981 called We Are Family. And it was done on the exterior of a very dilapidated, semi-abandoned building. And these were all people, including the woman in the middle, who was kind of the grandmothery person that was, in a sense, knowing all these various people.
Yeah.
And this was part of a lot of projects that were being done in relation. This is John's double Dutch piece that was done exterior on an outside wall when it was first erected. And there were other artists that were working in this vein, in this neighborhood. And there was an art show that happened at Fashion Moda that you attended, the Graffiti Art Success show.
Yes. Yes.
Which was organized by Crash, and I don't know if that's coming, but we have this great picture of you outside of this.
Yeah, we'll get to that. And so
okay, yes, yes. So
you know, and again, one of the things that was quite fascinating about this period, again, there was this kind of convergence of culture downtown and uptown, and you know, the one person that kind of steps into your world and kind of really kind of you and Fab Five really start contemplating.
Right. Well, that happened we met at the Times Square show, and Fred was coming to the Times Square show to find a place to show his work. And he's right here posing in front of one of Lee's murals, which is the Graffiti 1990 mural. And so Fred approached me at the Times Square show because he had heard about my martial arts movie from the posters that were in Lee's neighborhood. And we started talking, and there's an image that what I said, Fred and I were talking about making a movie, and Fred had this idea of making something that would combine graffiti on trains with the kind of music that was just coming out of the Bronx then, called hip hop. And I said to him, well, if you can bring Lee Quinones to the Times Square show tomorrow, I will meet you right here downstairs, and we can get some paint and you can do a mural on the outside of the building. Now you have to understand, I had no permission to paint on the outside of this building or to offer it to him, but that's the way we did everything in those days. And that fab that you see is done by Lee, and the Five is done by Fred. And they painted it that's not anyone I know in the middle. It's just a homeless guy drinking wine.
Well, one of the things that I like about this presentation and what we're talking about is that how in your current work you start infusing these stories, right? You map them out.
Yes.
And it's really wonderful. I think tell us a bit about this. And
okay, I will try to explain that what you're looking at is painted on canvas, and it's a little hard to read, but what I'm doing is I'm trying to give people a location of where these various things occurred. And if you go down, you see, like right now, you're going down and you see Grandmaster Flash off to the right, and it says the Boogie Down, which is the Bronx. And all these people are people that were pioneers of the hip hop movement. And even in Brooklyn, you had Grandmaster Flowers. There's a little sign pointing to the right because Brooklyn is off the map. But I'm trying to give an homage to the place and to the people that helped make this culture happen in the Bronx. in 1979 before it went commercial with records, etc. And so I appreciate you showing this to people. And it's kind of fun to see up close because you can really look at it. And I want to just also add to that, that behind me, if you're wondering, is an image of a painting, and that's Dada Rock in the center of the painting. And that's from a photograph that I took of this, one of the principal MCs of the Fantastic Five in the Bronx. And that's his bedroom of flyers on his wall. And it's from an original photograph from 1980, but those flyers are all hand painted on that canvas and then silk screened the text over that.
So there was this connection between flyers, notably in graffiti, notably Phase 2 and Buddy Esquire and
Yes.
and others.
Yes.
Which is beautifully highlighted in Joe Conzo's book, actually, the
Yes.
Born in the Bronx book.
Yes.
But tell me about that. About
one of the first things I began to do when I started to make Wild Style with Fred was to go to a place called the Ecstasy Garage. And there is an image of the Ecstasy Garage. It's a little, yeah, it's better. Darker is better. Now it looks great. The Ecstasy Garage was just a big cement room, and it was filled with teenagers, and they were all drinking like quart, Old English, malt liquor, teenagers. And they were listening to people like Grand Wizard Theodore scratch mixing, and there in this picture you see Busy Bee on the microphone. And in the photograph, I'm doing slideshows on the wall. This is like interactive, getting with the culture, etc. And Phase 2 is in the middle of that picture that you see. And Phase 2 was the one who was, in a sense, the glue holding all these worlds together, because he knew the world of graffiti being one of the major developers of this whole balloon style lettering that you see here, this fat style lettering from the early 70s. And that's Phase 2 at Razor Gallery in 1974, which was like the first major art show of graffiti. And he came up to me while I was doing the slideshow, and Phase handed me this slide and said, "Why don't you add it to the show?" And I thought, yeah, he's part of it. And he immediately in my mind became part of this imaginary movie that I was making in my mind with all this talent that was around us.
And really, what I mean, you're from upstate New York. How did you manage to arrive kind of in really the worst places of the city, huh? When you were
Well, I came to New York in 1973 with the Whitney Museum as a studio artist with the Whitney Museum. And I was very interested in contemporary art at that point. But I got dissatisfied, and I began to feel like I wanted to connect to the great world that was outside of the art world and find a way to make art with a wider range of people. And so I began to go to Lee's neighborhood, which was only 2 blocks away from me downtown near the Brooklyn Bridge, which was how I got involved in seeing b-boying and seeing martial arts and seeing all these things happening. And this is after I met Fred and we started to make Wild Style. You see a picture of Busy Bee with King Case in the center. And King Case was really one of the, outsized legends from the whole history of graffiti. And he had one arm, and it was hard to imagine how did he do these whole car abstractions that he did with his name. And he was actually the king of style, as he might say. But he was also King Case.
Yeah, may he rest in peace. And
Yes.
I'll say that he was as agile and fluid both with his body and his spoken word. You know, he was a very
Yes.
rhythmic man,
And
kind of like an MC, free thought MC.
I will say that when we were set to make Wild Style, I was thinking of the Phase 2 character, and I was thinking, oh, we needed someone who could act as a bridge between the train culture and the uptown hip hop culture. And Phase 2 was not really joining the team. He wasn't involved in the movie. So I turned to Fred and I said, Fred, it's you. And so Fred became this character who he really was in real life, which was this sort of connector between these different worlds. So you see Fred here with Busy Bee and Case. And I have to say that Fred at one point mentioned to me that he was getting a lot of his style that he used in the movie for his character from people like Case. Because as you said, Case had tremendous style. Yeah, hold this wide for a second.
Style, you know, that b-boy style was so important to everybody, that finesse.
Yes.
And it wasn't just clothing, it was a swagger, it was an attitude, it was a walk, a diddy bop. It was a way to look at somebody.
So what I just want to say that when we were making Wild Style, Jane and I were living in a loft right in the middle of Times Square. And she was painting paintings that were about what she saw when she was on the street. Don't zoom in too much because we want to be able to see the other painting as well. And she was painting paintings that she saw out on the street and things that she felt she was witnessing as a woman. And in this photograph is a wonderful image which has the Cold Crush brothers. If you can zoom back for a second, the Cold Crush brothers would come up to visit the Wild Style office, as many people did. And here they are posing in front of Jane's paintings. And Jane was in the other room right when we were there painting her pictures in the front room, which was also her studio at that point.
I remember visiting back in the days, and you know, Times Square it was a lively, and I got to say this about her work, she captures it so beautifully, as you know, in her paintings, in terms of the color and the textures and those stories, and of course the Wild Style office, as I mean, can you imagine, it was a storied place, wasn't it? Because of all these legends that were coming through.
The other room, which I used as my office, had like small versions of everybody that I knew, had small artworks teaming the walls with work. So it was really so rich. And of course, Times Square was also the place where all the editing rooms were and the place where all the labs were. So the whole film business was coming in and out of Times Square.
Yes, and the garment district. It was a busy, amazing time.
Yes.
And let me ask you something. I mean, given that you were older than all these, didn't you think it was odd? Like, oh, I'm going to hang out with these teenagers and you know, befriend this whole.
This is a great picture because it shows your brother Cal, and he's looking at a piece book, right?
He's drawing on a piece book, yeah. Yeah,
and there's Lady Pink. Yeah. And I want to tell you that taking this picture of Lady Pink, really, I never could stop thinking about who is this woman with the Pink Panther sweatshirt, and and it became a obsession with me, but it was also obviously an obsession with Lee Quinones because they were having a kind of secret relationship at this time that people didn't know about, but I knew about it. And it became the inside story of the movie Wild Style, which was so crazy to put something real like that right in the
Right.
middle of this
Right.
movie.
Yeah, we're going to jump right into that in a minute.
It's so crazy, but this picture that you're showing right now is so
Okay, let's try this again. Sorry, folks. Seems like we lost Charlie. Can you guys hear me still? It's freezing up. Let's try
on.
this again. Here we go. We're back.
Yes. And this is crazy. So this shot, can you tell me who the woman is with you've got your arm around Pink and this woman next to you? And
The blonde girl is Lady Linda,
yes.
and then next to me in front of Kel is Lolly, Pink's sister, who he was dating.
Okay.
Next to Lady Pink, you have Python,
Wow.
Kenji, and in the back you have Lady Heart,
Yes.
smiling, and you have Johnny Crash in the back.
Yes. And I just want to say that in this show, so many dozens of artists had their first ever art show of their work, like Pink. Pink had never shown artwork as an artist before that show. And it set her off for 40 years and she hasn't stopped. And
Yeah.
that's true of people like Core and so many other artists
Others,
had never.
at that time, Futura, I think there was a bunch of us who were kind of one of the important things about those happenings, especially with Fashion Moda and the Times Square show, that many of us were thinking about like, well, we're artists, aren't we? And like,
Yes.
it was a seminal moment for me because with Henry, we went to see the Picasso show, the huge retrospective as all
Yeah.
this was happening. So there was this kind of like really inquisitive kid in me, uh, asking what art is and could be, and whether or not we were legit. And so obviously, those shows, and I think also as we look at this map, right, and we think about this particular piece about, and I really dig this, by the way, because
I would like you to say some things about it because you could talk about what those places meant to you.
well, what's interesting is that for me anyway, is that as a Bronx writer, Kel and I traveled all to all the boroughs, especially him. But in those early days, we'd go all the way from the Bronx all the way up here to South Bronx, all the way to see Dondi in East New York to paint with him, and to New Lots. And that's a mission, and that's a scary mission for someone who's like, what, 11 years old? And going to East New York to paint. But this is nice because, again, there are things in kind of the blueprint of this story, right? That sometimes it's important that the story is also told from non-writers, right? That people that were there and remember and recall, so to speak. That said, you know, the trains were important, and you, of course, become friends with Zephyr, and this would turn out to be just as important a relationship as Fab Five.
Absolutely. Zephyr was around a lot. He came to the office, and Dondi came to the office, and they would hang out in the and we would go over ideas for the film. And you know, I was really thinking a lot about having Dondi play the leading role in the movie, and I was also thinking of Zephyr and the role that Zephyr would play in the movie, which of course he did play a role in the movie. And it turned out, as it were, that it was great to have Zephyr there, because he not only could, in a sense, legitimize a lot of the ideas that were in the movie, but we went out to the yards together. Not this time. What you're seeing there is, I don't know where that picture was taken. I didn't take this picture.
Yeah. No.
But the other train that we were looking at, if we could go back to that this train was painted by Zephyr did the heroine. If you see the word heroine, yeah. And the second word is the word kills, which is done in a wild style by Dondi. And the first image on the train is an image of the little red devil, which they let me tag along and paint that section of the train. And it sort of created a whole car, a window down. And I love Zephyr's style on the word heroine. I think Zephyr had lost a friend to heroin, and we were painting this car. He really wanted to paint this car to, in a sense, warn people that heroin kills. And you can see right in the picture, you can see that it says Westchester Avenue in Trinity. So anyone that wants to can go right to that location and see where this photograph was taken.
So this relationship, which proved to be very fruitful for the film as well, because he created the iconic Wild Style logo. Yes,
and of course, the animation, which was done a whole year before this. So in a sense, you have to start, you know, with the animation, which was based on the animation. Okay.
No, keep talking about the animation.
Okay, the animation was based on, Dondi did a Wild Style car that was in the movie, and that set the standard for how those letters were going to be pictured. And so from that, Zephyr began to develop ideas for how the words could be drawn. And I want to just mention that Jane also worked on the animation as a layout artist, because she had done this professionally. And Zephyr also brought in Revolt, who worked on the animation for the movie, and this is the spot. That one shot of Wild Style is the thing that people remember most. And what you're just seeing now is the trailer for the film. But the Wild Style wall that was done a year later was really trying, I really needed something to bring to people to show them what the movie was in a single sheet. the animation was inside the movie, but I needed a poster or I needed something that would represent the film. And Zephyr worked with Revolt to design something that could represent the movie. And we talked about it and how it needed to be legible in a very simple form. And so there you have it. And then the time came when they painted it with Sharp overnight on this wall, and it's an immense wall. You see how small Sharp is in the background. And Marty Cooper came with her camera and set up a little step ladder, and she took these images of Doze and Ken Swift in the foreground, and Frosty Freeze and Patty Astor and Lady Pink and Fred, and all this created a kind of world that could then be made into a poster and represent something of this very complex community.
Each to have a tremendous legacy in this culture, so to speak, you know?
Yes. It's
so the film, you know, which is a love story of all things, and this is the amphitheater in the Lower East Side. And
yes.
You know, this is really interesting because when we got caught wind of this film, we couldn't quite, we laughed inside, but we also thought it was cool because there was so many good people that signed on. And you know, of course, Lee and Pink at that time, you know, that was, they were on fire. But also that, you know, you had the Fantastic, you had the Cold Crush. You know, it's amazing, you know, that it's hard for people to understand how amazing this actually is, and how this is so that do-it-yourself spirit, that, you know, low to no resources and having trust from the community to say, yeah, we'll go along, help tell our story too.
Yes, and teenagers from Queens, from Brooklyn, from Staten Island, from New Jersey came to New York when the film opened, and they were like masses. They had sold out the film for days in Times Square. Okay, I want to mention this because this is a mural by Days, which actually situates many important scenes in the movie around this. It's fictionally as if Pink is directing her street crew called the Union to paint this mural, but of course it's a mural done by Days, and it's completely Days. It's done in his inimitable style.
Yeah.
And it really showed, we were able through this mural to not only have what was going on in the daytime, but also to have that scene with the shotgun stick-up kids.
A to the K.
A to the motherfucking Z, because that scene really set a bar for people. When that happened, people were like, oh, they're going there. This is real. This is what it's like in the Bronx. So those guys, of course, were real. The guys with the shotgun, Pookie and his two friends.
Yeah.
And what they were doing was they were doing what they would do to rehearse a stick-up.
That's so crazy. A little factoid, by the way. This in the movie, I'm actually in the movie with walking in
Yes.
to Dixie with Rocksteady.
Exactly.
But the clip, the filming I remember we did was at the amphitheater. It was me, Duro, and Shy, I think, or somebody else.
Yes, and there were the Salsa Twins playing conga drums.
Do you still have that footage, or whatever happened to all the archival extra footage?
That's a deep, deep vault that you're talking about. It's beyond my reach.
So the film is a success. I remember this day. I remember filming at the amphitheater and the energy and being so hyped People were so excited, and yes, it was a bit chaotic, but man, you had double trouble. You had all the top MCs at that time from uptown
Yes,
and in the Bronx take over the Lower East Side.
absolutely. So, yeah, yeah, I mean, the film was a huge success when it opened in Japan.
Yeah.
We brought 36 people to Tokyo to represent the movie in Japan, and nobody knew what was the future. And this is like a great shot of Lee. I mean, this is a great shot
Crazy
of
Legs.
Busy Bee with crazy legs. Are you there?
Yeah.
And there's Lady Pink. And what we're seeing is Harajuku district, and this is Yoyogi Park. And there were all these kids that would come there on Sunday, and we went there with the kazooies. And you can see Busy Bee is just enjoying freaking everybody out with this Ayatollah of hip hop costume that he's got on, which Lady Pink did the t-shirt. This was the style that people were starting to get into in 1983. We started to see new kind of punk rock styling with hip hop mixed together.
Yeah. Also, it also echoes the freestyle, the Latin freestyle community. They used to do their tees like this. But you know what?
Yes.
What I like about this with the T, if we could pay attention to the T for a second, because the logo, it's interesting. We've seen so many iterations of it in commercially, and now we've seen it,
Culturally.
culturally in a phenomenal. Let me just zoom in so people get an idea of the scale. You see the people there?
Yes.
So this is a huge, huge production. I don't know who.
And this is in Holland. Understand that this is in Holland, and this is in a town in Holland. And so this is international. And, I'm just trying to show that it's not wild style, it's Black Lives Matter, and the concern that people had was international. And people felt that they could do it in using the kind of pattern that the Wild Style logo had with people, that people would recognize that when this Black Lives Matter is done, it connects to everybody that's already there.
Yeah.
And
so the next slide I want to show you, somebody bold enough.
Oddly enough, this is Amsterdam. This is like in 2008 in Amsterdam, and I was in a club with Crazy Legs and a bunch of other people doing some Wild Style event. And this guy comes up to me in the club, and it's totally dark, and he says, "My friend has something to show you." And as he's talking, his friend is unbuttoning his shirt, and he takes his shirt off, and I'm taking my camera out really fast, as quickly as I can, and he turns his back to me, and I take a single flash of him from the back, and I'm like trying to look on the camera to make sure that the picture was taken, and I look up and they're gone, and I never saw them again.
Wow, what a trip. There's a reason for everything.
So this is the Berlin Wall, and this was kids that had seen the movie on television, on German television, and they went out to the Berlin Wall, and there was no logo at that point. Like, we hadn't done this is before the logo was made. And they went out and they remembered the animation in the beginning of the movie. And so they pictured all these things on the Berlin Wall to represent something. And this remains the first graffiti style mural that was done on the Berlin.
Sorry for the technical difficulties. Let me try to get Charlie back on in a second. Yes, Tracy 168 is the founder of the crew and name Wild Style. I'll ask Charlie about that as well. Let me see if he'll come back on. So folks, bear with us as Charlie, he'll join us in a moment. I hope you guys are enjoying this conversation. It's pretty wild, you know, the story of his career and a story of hip hop, really. I mean, the pictures don't lie. Let me see. There we go, we're back.
Yes, we're back.
Yes. So the logo before the logo. So this is an important little factoid you're giving us about this piece. Being the first graffiti piece.
It's the first graffiti piece on the Berlin Wall, which of course was later just completely submerged in graffiti. Before that, people wrote words on the Berlin Wall, but it was not this style.
So Charlie, we've been talking a lot about the film and graffiti culture and some of your interests and of course filmmaking still remains one of your interests, and you've done quite a few that are notable. One of the ones that of a good friend, right, Jamel.
Yeah, Jamel Shabazz.
He's
one of the great street photographers of all time.
Absolutely. So tell me about working with him and getting to know him and what drives him.
Well, he did a book back in the day.
Yeah.
And Fred Brathwaite wrote something in the book. So Fred was already friends with him. And I went to the first time he showed the book out in a signing, and I went and started to befriend him, and we started to do things together. And at some point we were in the park shooting something, and he said, I would really like to make a film with you. Can we do a film together? And so I said, yeah, of course. And that ended up 10 years that I spent with Jamel Shabazz, watching him shoot and basically documenting him in so many interesting places and spaces.
Right, and he's not, he's one of many subjects. You've also did a wonderful.
I made this this Richard Hunt documentary, and Richard Hunt is really old school for sure. This guy was making a kind of abstract sculpture that was originally brought from junk sculpture that he was finding where people would throw things away. And this is a great image of his studio. And the studio that he had was where the trains, the L's in Chicago, had one time used this space as the factory for making those L's. And here's an L. And I thought it was really interesting that you make sculpture also. And that I thought there was a lot of conversation going on. This is a sculpture of Richard Hunt's. And that's Kerry James Marshall right there talking to Richard Hunt. God bless him. He's one of my favorite artists of all time. And some people might look at some of this sculpture and go, wow, that looks a little like the sculpture that Mayer makes, which you could, of course, relate to Wild Style and etc.
Well, yeah, he's very dynamic, and I was really moved by the film when I saw it, and you know, he is uh, just such a master of his craft and his ideas and just what really blew me away at his age, at you know, the labor, you know, it takes to do that, you know, to do this work, and the commitment, and especially I'll underscore it with this, that he was an African American sculptor of this caliber, and that's not, you know, they're not recognized, that generation of sculptors in LA.
Yes, he came in the 50s.
Yeah, yeah,
And this shows you the scale of his work.
yeah, and you had mentioned he I forget what age he showed at MoMA.
He didn't show there. They bought a piece of his when he was only 18 years old. Someone at MoMA found out about his work, and they bought one of his pieces when he was only 18 years old.
Wow.
Which is quite a, I don't know, that's probably the record for, you know, what it is. And this here is something that I'd like to bring to people's mind, because there's a version of this at the Museum of the Universal Hip Hop Museum in the Bronx. And this painting, which is quite large, it's about 10 feet wide by 6.5 feet tall, and it's a collection of Dada Rock's flyers in his bedroom. When I first met Dada Rock, he brought me into his room and he showed me all these flyers on the wall, and I took his picture in this pose. And we've recreated these flyers by hand. I hand painted this canvas, and we silk screened these flyers onto this canvas to recreate the world that was in 1980. That was, these flyers, a lot of them are from 1979, and it really contains the whole first generation of hip hop.
Was it hip hop? It wasn't hip hop till 1980, right?
Well, I don't think there's a single flyer there that says the word hip hop.
None.
But it wasn't rap either. Understand that it was not called rap on the flyers.
Right. It was
MC. It was called jams, and it was called a lot of things. And it was b-boying, and it was MCing, and people were called MCs, not rappers. So, and all the people that formed the early pioneers of hip hop are identified on these flyers. So I'm very proud to be able to show this.
So now that you are at, like me, at a certain age and reflecting back at life, in a life that was both carefree, dangerous, adventurous, promising. It was really, it was taking away a lot, but also promising. And here we are in kind of this, in a country that has have kind of monoculture, right? And,
yes.
And you were there when you saw us kind of scrapping two sticks and some stones to create something. And now the world is enamored, so to speak. It falls in and out of love of this culture, doesn't it?
From Japan in 1983, they were in love with it.
Yeah.
It's been an evolutionary thing, because all those cultures that saw it and fell in love with it made it their own culture. The DJs, you know, the MCs, the artists in Sao Paulo, and the you know, the MCs in England, and that, you know, you had people making it their own all over, and that's why it's now called the universal hip hop culture.
Yeah.
And I think that the one thing that it does is that it represents people. whatever their mode and whatever their background, people can utilize the culture to represent themselves.
Yeah, and well, what's interesting about that, right, is that you know, about culture, about having to go kind of through a social validation, right? We're here at that place 10 times. Where
Yes,
back then you didn't need validation for the culture, so to speak. We were just, that's what we were. And then once the kind of we caught the attention, right, of the culture class, right? The culture class and the vulture class come in, and all of a sudden it's kind of the culture becomes so self-conscious of itself, and things start to shift, right? And we're still seeing the shift of the culture becoming commerce and popular. There's this constant an appropriation, so to speak, right? I mean, even like wild style is an appropriation, right? Appropriation of a name that was created by Tracy, but also a term that we saw as the art, that the A style of lettering, right? And even with that, the beauty of hip hop culture is reappropriation and remixing.
absolutely. Everything was appropriate. What people put on the trains was often appropriated from other sources. And, like Fred doing the Campbell soup cans, but also Lee doing the big Mickey Mouse train and all those other trains that appropriated things. But also, let's just say that the music was all a kind of reappropriation and reimagining of what could be. And it brought things closer to people because it made teenagers think that they had control over, they had agency in some way over their lives. And they did.
And maybe a little bit too much, because you alluded this earlier, like these teenagers going to clubs to drink. I can remember that.
That's the truth.
We live to tell. We live to tell.
I mean, yes. And the thing is that what's important is where we're going and what we have now. And of course, it's not just that we're living in a monoculture, but we are in a world lockdown, and we see no end in sight yet. So this is definitely something to try to understand how this can evolve in its present state, because hip hop was all about getting out, getting out of the house and going to the jam on the corner, or getting out of the house and going to the yard, or going out with your friends.
But hip hop was also the message, right? And that was really important, because when Grandmaster Mel dropped that song, he was responding to crises that were happening around us, right? And from your vantage now, you think about this culture, and of course, it's open debate with everyone as to how a culture, hip hop culture, responds to this time. There's a bit of a conundrum, right? Like as to how you define what hip hop culture is and how it should respond to Black Lives Matter, LGBTQ issues, government issues.
Can we say that it responds massively? The response was massive.
Yeah.
It continues to be so.
I don't, yeah, I think.
I don't want to debate. I don't want to, I'm just.
Go ahead.
I don't want to, it's because we're going through so many things right now as a culture and as a world culture. And you can't really talk about it in terms of what was happening, let's say, in April and May, compared to what was happening in the summertime,
fair enough.
What's happening now.
Fair
it's
enough.
all changing. It's changing. And people have to respond in kind.
Yeah.
We have a new president coming, and we have a new condition coming, and as we were told, it's a dark winter that we're approaching.
Well, I mean, thankfully we here, at the museum have, taken this moment very seriously to reach out to our community and have these conversations about us and the world we saw and the work and the work we did. And that it's so important, and I appreciate everything you shared, and the memories that come back from such a special time of youth. And so I hope that those who are young, who are listening to you and I this evening, can, in the spirit of what we lived, have hope that they too will have kind of those kind of creative liberties in their lives.
Yes.
This lockdown is crushing the kids, man. Not good. But that said, I will be with kids. I will be with kids this Sunday, teaching them a little bit of graffiti writing at the museum.
Cool.
The mission continues.
Yes. And thank you for having me on your program here. And I love the Ken Swift program that you did with him. And that was very personable. And so Ken is a master.
Yeah. I enjoyed him, man. We've known him, we've grown up with him. So likewise, I enjoyed this conversation with you, and again, giving people a bit more of your story than they may have otherwise not known. So Charlie,
thank you.
Till we meet again, my
friend. All right. Good night.
I'm signing out, folks. Thank you for everybody.
Good night to everyone out there, and let's do it. All right.
Last shout out. There you go.